Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. A few things for you today that I thought I'd talk about. Obviously, recently Winnie Mandela passed away, and it reminded me of a documentary I saw recently about her life. I think it was a PBS one. And it was interesting to see the discrepancy between that documentary, which actually interviewed Winnie Mandela herself, and her portrayal in movies about Winnie Mandela, about Nelson Mandela himself, about the apartheid. Because my impression of Winnie Mandela, and this is maybe also through the news at the time when I was younger, was that she was someone fraudulent, someone who had stolen money, someone who was involved in nefarious means, and that's why Nelson Mandela divorced her. But when you see this documentary, it suggests that a lot of that was made up because when you see the difference between him and her, they were both struggling for the same thing, but she was a lot more radical, a lot more wanting more freedom. And their methods were slightly different. And obviously those people, it made me wonder that was this whole, did they decide as apartheid was getting towards the end, as the pressure mounted, that the way to control this was to allow Nelson Mandela out, allow him to become the leader, make sure that he didn't do all of the things in his charter that would actually make everyone equal and free, which that was often a big disappointment that I saw when I saw what the charter was and how many of these things haven't really been sorted out. And when people were talking about Robert Mugabe, how obviously in the media here we have a bad impression of him. He's a terrible person. He did all those things to the farmers. But then when you look at it, what did he actually do? He was trying to take the land back from white people and give it back to the people, the indigenous people who actually lived there. But the way it was portrayed to us is like this person from another country, you can't trust them, and that, they're killing people to get land back, their own land. Whereas in South Africa, according to Robert Mugabe, the distribution of land is still more white people, more Afrikaans people still have that land. So despite Nelson Mandela being, and since his being the first ANC president, since all the others being ANC, they still haven't managed to give complete freedom to the indigenous people there. That whites and Afrikaans still own more of the land, and obviously more of the wealth. So then it makes you start to wonder, wait a minute, these people in charge, and often this is said when you listen to these conspiracy things, that the people in charge aren't really in charge, they're just there as like actors, figureheads. And it does make sense, because if you think of, I know this is controversial when talking about Nelson Mandela, and I think he was a great man, but what I'm saying is it possible that he was allowed to get in power to make sure that, he was handled, as it were, that he wouldn't go too far. Obviously, originally when he was in de Klerk was with him, so he was like his handler, really. And you can see that, they did certain things at the first few years, making housing. It was in Soweto and stuff like that. But then this whole thing all fizzled out after a while, and if the people aren't, if they're still, obviously there was no more fighting and stuff like that. But if the people aren't still more equal, then what really happened? All that really happened was that Nelson Mandela became the president, and that they had their freedom and they didn't have to fight anymore. But did they get everything that they really should have got? So anyway, leading back to how I started this conversation about Winnie Mandela, is that, that they targeted her, and in this interview they talked to actual people who were involved in that, and that they would, and we know this happens in the media when there's certain people that they don't like, they will bring up scandals, or they will talk about things that things that nearly billions of people do, but when you find out about it, it's, oh my God, that person's doing that. It's like it's unacceptable for them to be real people with faults, as if we're not. We all sin, we all do things that we're ashamed of, and good things and bad things. You know, no one's perfect, no one's a saint, but they often like to use things against people to bring them down, and we let them do that, despite, you know, we might even be guilty of them ourselves. So they used that against Winnie Mandela, and so it was interesting to show how history can be rewritten, I guess is the way, or can be told in different ways by different people. You know, you get lots of historians writing, and lots of movies. I mean, movies are the worst. You know, you can completely change history and get away with it. But what I mean, and maybe that's why, you know, I've ended up with this impression, but also my impression is based on the news as well at the time. But it was interesting to see how this is just one person, and how their life can be told in two completely different ways. Now, you could say that the Winnie Mandela, because she was involved in that documentary, that's why it's pro her. But I guess the thing is, problem with the documentary is, surely it should be factual. There should, you know, there shouldn't be a possibility of being pro or negative. But it does seem to be that there is. So it made me then, I was thinking about this, and then how, you know, how the facts of history, how can we believe them? You know, we know, well, I know, obviously my time when the Iraq and Afghanistan war, and I know I've mentioned this many times, that I saw that these things were lies, the weapons of mass destruction. Everyone knows about that now, but at the time it allowed people to go into two sovereign countries, destroy their lives, take them over, that will still have impact in them, put puppet dictator leaders in there. You know, all this stuff that was done based on lies. But we saw it because it was because of the coverage of the media, because of other things, that we were able to see this. And so that, I remember thinking at that time, you know, what about things of the past, battles of the past, the Second World War? Obviously, I'm not saying that Hitler wasn't a bad person, but you hear a lot of people talking about it was really to do with power, that it was at that time when everyone wanted to gain power, and this war needed to take place because they wanted the power, they wanted to shut Germany down. Or, you know, was he allowed, like Saddam, to make the mistakes, to be encouraged to make mistakes? You know, like when Saddam invaded Kuwait and he was told, it's, you know, you could do it, and then immediately did it, and the Americans used it against him. Now, I'm not saying Saddam Hussein and Hitler weren't bad people. Yeah, obviously they were bad people. They did horrendous things. But what I'm saying is these wars are used as like good versus evil, and, you know, it's justified what we did, and, you know, everything that took place. But really, was it really about that morality, or was it really about power and money? You often on YouTube have heard many different stories where you find that there were organisations that were funding both sides. You know, British companies, American companies, German companies, whatever, wherever they were funding both sides. I don't know if it was Rothmans or whether was it Rothmans, Rothschild, whatever it is, the one that they always talk about, you know, that they were funding both sides of this. And that made me, you know, that makes, you know, when you find it out now, obviously at the time no one knew about that, but now we all know about these things. It makes you wonder about how many of these battles, what were they really about? Obviously we're taught, you know, obviously when you saw the propaganda from both sides, it's about, you know, defending women who were getting raped. I know that about when in history, when we studied about the Boer War and stuff like that, how they made up stories about Boers raping people, and that it wasn't really true. Why did they do these things? Because they want us to believe in this idea of black versus white, as, you know, good versus evil. To hide, obviously, what the real matter is. And this gets me on to another point. I remember I was talking to my dad about 9/11, this, that, and stuff, and I was, you know, I don't think he was that convinced, and he was coming up with probably the same arguments that I would have came up with before, that, you know, oh, it was the planes and the fuel and all this, that, you know, the building may have not been stable or whatever. It was an old building. But the fact that I said to him, I remember saying that, like, if I actually knew the truth, if somehow, I was able to actually know 100% the truth, and, it was a setup and this, that and the other, and I went out and said, this isn't true, no one would believe me. It wouldn't matter that I knew the truth, no one would believe me, because I'm just one person. And also because we are programmed to believe organisations, groups of people. When it comes to, if you think about how it goes in court cases, we have a group of witnesses, we have prosecution, we have defence. It can't just be one person. You have to have, we're taught that, if one person tells a lie, you need a few others to be able to convince everyone that, could two people saying it now, that must, be a problem. So that's what I was saying, that it wouldn't matter if I 100% knew the truth, if God suddenly gave me the truth, or somehow I found documents proving it. They could ridicule me, no one would believe me, my own parents wouldn't believe me, because... And that just shows you that it doesn't really matter whether you know truth or not. It would never be possible to convey it. And then lastly, on the nerve agent thing, that's the thing that's happening at the moment in Salisbury in the UK. So what made me laugh is that now Porton Down, who had done their studies, they said it's Novichok, but they said they can't say where it came from, who did it. They can't pinpoint Russia. And it's interesting that, now suddenly Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the UK, is saying, yes, well, this is just one part of the investigation. And I love how they manage to just, they can just manipulate things like that. Just this is one part, and it's just so clever how they can manage to do these things. Like in real life, you wouldn't be able to get away with that kind of thing. If your hand was found in the cookie jar, that would be the end of it. But no, you can just turn around and say, no, this is just one part of it, and because the other parts negate what that one says, well, we'll just forget about that then. We'll just do a complete whitewash. It's brilliant, isn't it, really, how people in power can do things that we ordinary people wouldn't be able to get away with. We wouldn't even think about doing something like that. It just would make no sense. You wouldn't be able to get away with it, but they can just say, yes, no, well, they're not meant to, they're not, we didn't ask them to find out where it's come from, we have other people who are doing that, or it doesn't matter that they can't say it was Russia. But the fact is that everyone's been saying it's Russia since day one. So what would it matter, even if Porton Down did turn out, or was it the OPCW, the ones that were meant to be doing the independent, if there is such a thing, investigation, and I think they couldn't even pinpoint it back to Russia, but they can say it's a nerve agent, and they can say it's Novichok. And obviously the thing is like, well, who did it then? It's easy to say Russia did it, but anyone can make nerve agents, surely. Come on, you're telling me that Britain, America, Mossad, whoever, can't make CIA, MI6, they can't make nerve agents? If you're a country that already manufactures nerve agents, you can make them. And I'm sure they all have bits of them anyway, because how do they test them if they don't have bits of them? And once you have something, you can obviously replicate it if you're able to make it yourself. And it's not like we've never used nerve agents in wars. Wasn't Agent Orange Winston Churchill used? No, it wasn't Agent Orange, that was in the Vietnam War, wasn't it? But I know Winston Churchill used a nerve agent, a gas, in the Second World War, often hidden up. Because we can't say anything about the great leader, Winston Churchill, despite all the bad things that he did. Because he fought with a white hat on. He was for the people. Oh, how we're misleaded. The thing that's always struck me with the Russian story is that, and they don't mention it so much now, but they did at the beginning. They mentioned that when they left the house, they went to the mother, his wife's grave, and then he went to the restaurant and then to the park bench. To me, that sounds like a suicide pact. That's what I always thought when I first heard it. That he went to, either he knew he was going to get killed or he was killing himself. To me, it seems like, yeah, because you went to the graveyard, unless he did it all the time. It seems like to me, like in a movie, that's to say goodbye, you know. That to me seemed like a motive. It's interesting how now they don't even mention that because obviously they know that will confuse the whole story for people, and maybe other people will think like me and think, oh yeah, why did he go to the graveyard? Did he know something was happening? I don't know. I guess when they wake up, it depends whether it really happened to them, or whether they were compliant or not, whether they would be made compliant or not. Because, you know, if you want a story to get out, there's easy ways to pay people to say things or not say things, isn't it? You know. And anyway, they were spies, and you know, I mean, the very fact of the matter that they were given up back to us. So if Russia wanted to kill them, why would they go about it in such a sloppy way? I mean, surely they're much better at killing people than that. I mean, we all know countries go around killing people. So it seems a bit sloppy. And to use your own nerve agent also. And to make it so like, oh, you know, this nerve agent, he got at the front door, and they're saying now, it was before this, it was a restaurant, and the front door of the house. And you know, that also makes me think that, you know, if it was in the house, it could have been a suicide pact. They went to the house and it went all over the place. I mean, why wouldn't they use something quicker? Something, you know, cyanide or something that you wouldn't, you know, or just run them over or shoot them or just kidnap them. People go missing all the time and no one cares about it. Anyway, as ever, a lot more questions. That's the problem. When you open your mind to the possibility that everything you see might not actually be as it is, you're left with so many questions, so many possibilities, that it's then difficult to find your way through the darkness to know which is the true path. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.